Hello, Subhash sir. Thank you for coming again the second time to the Atman Show. And Subhash Kak is an Indian American computer scientist and historical revisionist, and he's also a Padma Shri awardee. So I also see that you are a member of Prime Minister's Science, Technology, Innovation, and Advisory Council. So that's really something big, and I'm really honored that you agreed to come to my episode second time. So do you have to say anything to my viewers of the Atman Show before we begin the interview?
Thank you, Anamika, for having me again on your show. Delighted to be a part of it. And all I can say is that listen to the Atman show. You'll learn a lot from it.
Okay, thank you. So let's begin the interview. I know today actually Sir has written a book, and this looks like this. This is called The Idea of India, and I have made some notes, and we are going to talk about this book. So you said that I think I also read in I was listening to one of your interviews as well. Um, George Orwell, who controls the past controls the future, who controls the present controls the past. You wrote the book to fight for the wrong narrative for India. So, do you have anything to say on that to my viewers?
George Orwell was a visionary. He was an Englishman who was born in India, and then he wrote a couple of very great books where he talked about the future and the present of his times. Now, certainly, if you don't control the present, then you don't know what your past was, because the guys who control the present will tell you this is who you are, and therefore this is all you can hope to be. So they control all your life. And that is sadly what's happened to India, because even though India became politically independent 75 years ago, but its narratives on what India is and what India was, particularly what India was, in my view and in the view of many prominent scholars of the world, who are not wedded to the Eurocentric colonial perspective, they believe that what Indians have been told about India's past is incorrect. So I thought I should do my two bits to make the correction, especially from my perspective as somebody who's looked at the history of Indian sciences, which again, where again, Indians are totally misinformed about what India's scientific contributions to the world is. So I thought I should do my bit and write a story, which is how this book came to be written.
All right, thank you. So casteism, like I want to start with this topic. This is you said this is was created. It's a colonized view. Like it is not what it is like presented. And you know what? I don't know if you heard the news that Seattle banned caste discrimination, and this raises Hindu phobia or something like that in US itself. And so I think I want you to clear the myth about, the caste system, and it is looked upon in a very negative way. So can you clear all the myths about casteism?
Oh, absolutely. Now, of course, what India has always had, like all other societies, people are aware of their lineage, their family, and that's called the jati. So, like every other country, there are many hundreds or thousands or millions of jatis in India. Now, what is something that one should not forget is that India's share of the world economy in about 1000 was 45%. When the English established themselves properly in India about 1800, it was still more than 20%. And by 1918, the horrific things that happened in India, because India got deindustrialized and India became a dumping ground for the new factories that were established in Britain and elsewhere, India's share of the world economy dropped to 1.8% by 1918. So India became horribly impoverished in the 19th century. And as a result, the jatis turned on each other. So the stories that we generalize from, hey, this is what happened in the 19th century, were not true prior to that. So it was the horrific starvation And according to some estimates, as many as 100 million Indians might have died, not because of the beheadings that they were doing, but because of their policies and their, looting of India's wealth. Now, what happened furthermore, the late 19th century, the British started going around taking census, figures across India, and they went to various jatis. They said, "What varna are you?" See, varna is a theoretical scheme that there are four varnas: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. That's a theoretical scheme because the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda, which is invoked to speak about this Varna scheme, says that every human being has the same Atma. And from the same Atman, these are Purush. From the head came the Brahmins, from the arms came the Kshatriyas, from the thighs came the Vaishyas, and from the feet came the Shudras. But this is a theoretical classification of the classes in any society. In any society, there would be some people who are doing one kind of work, and other people, farmers, would be one class, and so on. But there was no one mapping between the jatis and the varnas. Maybe there were some who were the priests. They said, "We are Brahmins." But that apart, when the English census takers went to various jatis, they said, "What varna are you?" They said, "What varna? We don't know any varna. We are this jati and we have our own priests." They said, "No." The English census takers, they said, "No, you are this varna and you are this varna. You are a Shudra, or you are this, or you are that." And then, since they said that, and then they even declared that there are certain jatis who were criminal jatis. Anybody who resisted them, they said, "You're criminal." And the one who collaborated with them, they said, "Okay, we're going to give you special dispensation and special facilities and so on." And I think that's what led to, first of all, certain jatis internalizing that this is who we are, which is not what the case was prior to that. Because if you look at it from an intellectual or spiritual basis, Indians have always been aware that the same Atman, the Atman Dhi Atman Sho, the same Atman resides within each person, right? So within each person, this Atman is also called Purush. So this Purush within each person has the capacity to do either the work of the Brahman, which means intellectual work, or the work of the fighter. Everybody should be a warrior. Sometimes every family, people have to be warriors to support protect their family, right? Or to earn for their family, which is a Vaishya, or to be in the service of the family or the community, that is a Shudra. So everybody has the potential, and all human beings do one or the other Varna at different times of the day, or in different aspects or different moments in their lives. But sadly, because of the whole system, as India tried to bounce back, incentives were created for jatis. First of all, jatis really became very poor, and some became so poor that it was really horrific. And so in fact, soldiers who had been made prisoners during the Turkish times, Islamic period. Now they got out of the society, and they were then looked down upon, right? People who had made slaves and so on. So it's a complex story, but really, if you address it from within the tradition, and you do that, how do you do that? You go back to history, back into native, that is Indian accounts, or accounts of foreign travelers who came to India, even 2000 or 2300 years ago, when the Greeks came to India and Megasthenes came to India. He was an ambassador in Chandragupta Maurya's court. He didn't say there were four varnas. He said there are so many classes. So this whole four varna thing, as representing jatis, was truly an invention of the English, and it helped them sort of control
divide and rule. They
Absolutely.
divided the even the Indian people, and then
Right.
yeah.
So this is the jati story. This is the caste story. And now the word caste is not in any Indian language. Caste is a Portuguese word, which
Yeah.
really means class, right? So now Indians, by looking at themselves through colonial eyes, are using the term caste. Of course,
Oh,
they don't call it caste; they say caste, casteism, right?
mhm.
Because it's not an Indian word.
Yeah.
The Indian words are only jati and varna, and jati is familial lineage, which is in every society. In every society, people know which lineage they come from, who their parents are, who their grandparents are, great grandparents are, what language do they speak, and that's what jatis are.
Mm. You talked about slave. Like we have a common thing that the blacks were slaved and they came to America. But when once I went to Florida and I had an Uber driver, and he said that he was Ram Singh. So I said, like, I was like surprised, like, I've never seen a Uber driver called Ram Singh. So he said, no, there were a bunch of he said he's from the Caribbean island, and there were a bunch of slaves that came from India to the Caribbean islands, and then they still pray Ram and Sita and all that.
Oh, yeah, I've been to the Caribbean many times. And what happened was that when slavery was abolished, because first of all, Europe profited a lot through the slave trade from Africa, right? And prior to that, slavery was established in Islamic countries because it was a part of their economy. Now, it is a big thing in Europe, but political equations changed and slavery was abolished. So they still needed workers to work these sugarcane farms,
Yeah.
very difficult work. So what they did was, instead of calling it slavery, they called it indentured workers from India, primarily from UP and Bihar.
Mm.
So they had to sign off on a form, and then they had to work for so many years. Of course, they were able to bring their families. So some went as singles. So it was effectively slavery, but legally not slavery. So it's their descendants who are in all the Caribbean islands, and they were great workers. If you go to Trinidad or you go to Guyana,
Mhm.
French Guiana, which is Suriname, or Guyana, which used to be called British Guiana, but now Guyana. So, in fact, a large fraction of the population there is of Indian origin. And now they are free. They're very smart people. They're doing
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, very
And they
smart
were
people.
asking me, like, where I want to know, like, about my culture, where to read. I said, and that time I started it on Gita. I said, okay, watch my channel, Gita, for episode 1. So they said, okay, and then, you can get book from Amazons and you can read that. So they were,
Well,
yeah.
In Miami, I've been to one of the Caribbean temples. They have their own temples. They're beautiful temples,
Mhm.
open, and no, they are very devoted to bhakti, and they're also intellectuals. As you know, one of the greatest writers of the past 50 years was somebody from Trinidad named V.S. Naipaul, and he
Oh,
won the Nobel Prize. And in fact, his younger brother, who died young, Shiva Naipaul, was also an outstanding writer. So there are many, many outstanding writers who have emerged from the Caribbean, who are of Indian origin.
okay. All right, I know from the last episode we have all talked about Newton, Leibniz, and some, but in your book, like you, let's talk about some science as well, like Pythagoras theorem. Geometric theorem it said that it was invented by Greece, but Buddhian is the original mathematician behind Pythagoras theorem.
See, absolutely, Bodhayan.
Mhm.
Bodhayan wrote these sutras called Shulba Sutras. And these sutras are how to make these Vedis meaning fire altars. Because as you know, in the Vedic ritual, you have a fire altar and you do your ritual. There's a fire is lit and you do mantras and so on. Now, these fire altars were to be built to certain specifications. And in fact, the basis to geometry, according to many historians, is that what the Vedic people said was the earth is to be represented as a circle and the heavens are to be represented as a square. So, a geometric problem that emerges is how do you create a circle equal in area uh, to a square? and that's how geometry begins. Or how do you, in Pythagoras theorem, you have ropes. They used to have ropes. So you draw a line, you draw another line, and then what's the size of the diagonal? And that is the Pythagoras theorem. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So you have it many centuries before Pythagoras in the Shulba Sutras. And in fact, according to very conservative dating, this Bodhayan Shulba Sutra is about 850 BCE, because that's when we have archaeological proof of these altars that we have constructed. So yes, Bodhayan Pythagoras theorem is prior, many centuries prior to its discovery in Greece.
Actually, I was talking to one of my guests. She's a filmmaker on Gurukul. And I was talking to her and said, we all can, start a movement saying that, even if it is on the name of Greeks or new law of gravity or Newton, we should start a movement saying that you should refer to our system and our, books that at least give a reference.
Oh, absolutely. I think part of the problem is Indian education, where Indian school books, Indian textbooks, in school or college, should have all these citations so that then people would be aware. But fortunately, it's all changing. Why? Social media. See,
Mhm.
social media has opened up the world for
Exactly.
people to uh, explore all this on their own and
Mhm.
ask themselves, is it really true? Is it really true that Bodhayan did the Pythagoras theorem, or it's also called the theorem of the diagonal of the square, many centuries prior? So they can Google it, and then they'll get all historians, well-established historians, saying that, and you can see the original Sanskrit also along with the translation. So you get convinced.
Mhm.
So all of this is now possible. Sadly, until about 10, 15, 20 years ago, before the internet, you were sort of, your thoughts were controlled by the official propaganda. Let's
Mhm.
call it propaganda,
Exactly.
official narratives that
Yeah.
this is what your past is. So you embraced it. Now you can fight it. You can say that, but this is not true.
Mhm.
And I want to change it. And it also gives agency to the individual, to every person. They can say, no, we want to do it differently. And in fact, what's really going on, Anamika, that the very system of college and university education is under a challenge by technology. Because, if you go to a private college in America right now, it costs you $80,000 to $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
Even in a public college, it costs you 30, 40, $50,000 a year. You study there for 4 years, you're taking a debt of several $100,000. And for most people, there are no jobs, or there are jobs, but they pay only 20, 30, 40. So how are you going to pay it back? And therefore, this whole way education has been organized has got to change, and it's got to become more democratic.
Mhm.
But of course, there's also a danger here. The danger is people with bad information, and there's also people with bad information for whatever reasons they own. The bad information is also on the internet. So the challenge is, how do you curate it?
Yeah.
Which is where a Gurukul comes in. The
Yeah.
Gurukul sort of signs off. They
Mhm.
say, yeah, this is fine, and you can, and this is what the citations are, and these are the URLs, and you can go to these references and check it out for yourself.
Yeah, I was talking to her and she's telling we are reviving Gurukul in India and there's a big movement to it. And I was asking her also, like, we cannot get rishis like Chanakya, Brahmagupta, and, Aryabhatta. But she said that there's a modern day rishi and they're well educated.
Oh,
So,
of course, rishis, or you didn't only had you didn't only have great rishis, but you also had slightly middling rishis as well, who are acharyas, the teachers. They're all wonderful people,
okay.
such wisdom. And in fact, I often say, if India has survived, Bharat has survived, it's because of the wisdom that children have received from their grandmothers,
Okay.
right? Who used to be at home and who had all this storehouse, treasure house of stories. And when you're growing up, you paid probably even more attention to what your grandmothers were saying. And that's why Indians are such a successful people all over the world. Because even though Their textbooks were giving them wrong information about what India's past was. They knew in their heart that this is not all the truth about our past,
Mm.
because we are being told something else by our grandmothers.
Yeah,
And I think that's what's saved India.
yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. Calculus and mathematics were invented by Kerala School of Mathematics prior to Newton and Leibniz. I know we already talk about Newton and Leibniz. And Jesus was a parent in Kerala and he took the knowledge and traveled to Europe. So looks like there was some kind of organization that took this
Oh,
knowledge from Kerala school and then they went to Europe and they said that this is ours. Is it something like that?
not quite. You know, Jesuits.
Oh,
Jesuits were a certain order created by the Pope.
okay.
And so the Jesuits were this order. These were Catholics who were trained into it, and they were sent out to China, India, other countries. And they were also asked, first of all, to spread Christianity, but also to gather whatever knowledge they could obtain from all these lands. So now we don't have any smoking gun proof
Mhm.
that calculus went from India, because it was already there about 200-300 years before Newton. We don't have smoking gun proof, but all the libraries of the Vatican are not open, and we don't know how information may have traveled back. Now, we do have the proof that many hundred years before that, when Indian number system went to Europe, it took Europe about 200-300 years to embrace it, because they had their own Roman numerals, as you know, C and X and L and so on. And not only that, Brahmagupta's number system, or mathematical operation, that um, 1 minus 1 is equal to 0. So you have negative numbers. They came from India, from Brahmagupta's book. You see that. So for 300 years, the church fought it. They said negative numbers are numbers from Satan.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that they didn't want to adopt Indian number system. They said, well, this is satanic, because how can you have negative numbers? If only positive numbers are from God, negative numbers are from Satan. But after 200-300 years, common sense prevailed. They realized it's nothing to do with God or Satan. These are just representation of information. So yes, there is a case to be made that because all this was calculus or infinite series was already well developed in India, and Jesuits were present trying to Christianize in that region at that time. So you can propose this hypothesis that this knowledge went from India to Europe.
Okay. All right. What do you think about Panini's influence on sociology?
Okay, absolutely, very, very important. Panini created his grammar on Sanskrit about 500 BCE. That's about 2,500 years ago. Most amazing mathematical structure, 4,000 algebraic rules, which gave all the productions of Sanskrit language. If you follow certain such rules, then you have this sentence, and that sentence is grammatically correct. Now, this is like a computer program. And in fact, some people say that Panini's grammar, the book is called Ashtadhyayi, which means 8 chapters, is really the world's first computer program. And uh, some people have even said that the most brilliant human being who ever lived was Panini. Because how did he create? Why should somebody even create 4,000 rules? How did he think of these 4,000 rules? You see that? And most astonishing thing is that there were certain Western or colonial scholars who said India didn't even have writing. How can somebody create 4,000 algebraic rules when there is not even writing? All stupidity. So now, when Europeans became aware of Panini's grammar, there was a Frenchman named de Saussure. He said, well, language is a sociological thing. Sociology, we relate to each other through language. So if language has rules, maybe uh, kinship, in family, how families relate to each other, that's another language,
Mhm.
right? How do people marry, or how do societies form? That's another language. So he was inspired by Panini's Ashtadhyayi. He said, well, we can therefore create a social science using similar rules. And in fact, that was the beginning of all the social sciences, which of course are taught in so many, you have anthropology, which is how did humans live in old societies, and of course societies which are still let's say isolated in South America or elsewhere. What's the structure of their society? So similar ideas to the ideas of language in Panini's grammar and other grammarians who followed Panini, many other great grammarians, including Patanjali, who also wrote the Yoga Sutras. He also wrote a very famous commentary on Ashtadhyayi, Panini's Ashtadhyayi, called Mahabhashya. And then there was another great grammarian 1500 years ago called Bhartrihari, who said that language has four structures or four kinds of language. One is Vaikhari, which is common, disconnected. Then Madhyama, which is sort of middle, and Pashyanti. Every sentence can have a surface structure and a deep structure, which is Pashyanti. Now, surface structure and deep structure are very recent concepts which were introduced by Chomsky, a famous linguist of the 20th century, who's still alive. So all of these ideas had an old history back in India.
All right. Moving on to next topic, influence Bharat on Central Asia. And you said that Gajalakshmi is found on a bowl, but there's Pashupati seal was also found in Central India. So, what was the influence of Central Asia? You mean China and things like that? That's or Morocco?
Right.
Which one?
Because what the colonials said, British historians, they said, well, all the things came to India from outside, from China, but the languages also came to India, not from China, from Central Asia, from Europe.
Okay.
And some who were more racist than others, they said even the Vedas were brought by these Sanskritic speaking people from Europe. But actually, the story is totally false, because India was.
Nobody will believe it. Even my son will not believe it.
Absolutely. It's so totally ridiculous that absolutely ridiculous. First of all, India was the most densely populated region of the world in ancient times. And even now, as you know, India has once again surpassed China as the world's most populous country. Now, what has come to light is that there are certain things which are fundamentally Indic in art. For example, if you show a goddess worshipped by two elephants, this idea could not have arisen in Europe. Why not? Because Europe didn't have elephants. Right?
Yeah.
Now, there's a very famous bowl which was discovered in Denmark, a silver bowl. It's called the Gundestrup cauldron. So it has several images, and it's about 2,000 years old or 2,100 years old. It has several images carved on it. And one of those images is a goddess with two elephants worshipping on the side, which is Gajalakshmi. No other culture in any part of the world has this idea of the goddess being worshipped by two elephants, right? And then it also has a yogi, just like the Pashupati seal. So what does it really mean? And the artisans, the artists who did it, apparently were from East Europe, and then they went to Denmark because this bowl was discovered in Denmark. So there was a kind of a traffic movement of people through Central Asia. And you don't only find Gajalakshmi or Yogi in Eastern Europe. You also find images of Shiva all over Central Asia, Maheshwara. You find in language itself, Slavic languages and other goddesses, Vedic goddesses and gods. And for example, Rod, like Rudra. And so all of this, you have all of these, and they are listed in the book, and you can explore that further. And not only that, from across Himalayas in Central Asia, which was an extension of India, where Indian languages were spoken, books were translated for about 1,000 years. Sanskrit books were translated into Chinese, which transformed Chinese society. and Japanese society and all of East Asia. And in fact, according to a scholar, 35,000 words of Chinese were made out of Sanskrit because they didn't have corresponding ideas and concepts in Chinese at that time. So they had to coin these words. So amazing. I think if last 50 years have been European or American century, and prior to that, you had British century for 100 years. But if you go back 1,000 years, it was the Indian millennium. For 1,000 years, India influenced and countries all or nations all around. China, Japan, from across Himalayas, Southeast Asia. In fact, it was even called Greater India. Indonesia was called Greater India until a couple of 100 years ago. And there, Java, or you have beautiful temples. In fact, the greatest Vishnu temple is in Cambodia, in Indochina, right?
So
So
yeah, I've
India
heard
has influenced both directions, across the
exactly.
Himalayas, across the boats towards Southern Europe and Southeast Asia.
So I've also heard that they still have, image of, I think Ganesha on their currency.
In Indonesia, yeah,
Yeah.
even now,
Mm.
Indonesia used to have on their notes, currency notes, the image of Ganesha. In fact, you have the Indonesian Airlines is called Garuda Airlines, right?
Yeah.
Garud is the Vahan of Vishnu. And there are beautiful temples in Bali.
Mhm.
And Balinese are Hindu even now, predominantly. But rest of Indonesia also, many Indonesians are coming back to Hinduism because there was a old 400-500 years ago, there was a prophecy that eventually uh, you know people will come back to it. Because what is Hinduism really? Hinduism is yoga, right? And yoga is conquering every corner of the world.
Exactly.
Hinduism is theory is one thing, but lived Hinduism is yoga.
Yeah.
What is Bhagavad Gita all about? Bhagavad Gita is the greatest book of Hinduism, right? And people take their
Exactly.
oath on Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita says life is all about yoga, and you can either do karma yoga, or yoga of good actions, or jnana yoga, which is yoga of knowledge. You think and question, that is yoga. Or you do bhakti yoga, you do it in devotion to divinity, to your deity. And that's what Hinduism is. The whole world is turning to it. People are doing either devotion, right? And of course, there are other concepts that come with it, like reincarnation, punarjanma, reincarnation, etc. And I believe there are certain polls according to which 60-70% of Americans already believe in reincarnation.
Reincarnation.
Yeah, so there was a very famous column about 15 years ago in Newsweek. I think the author was a lady called Lisa Miller. And this column title was, and you can Google it, "We are all Hindus now."
Mm.
That accepting in name,
Mm.
Europeans and Americans have already adopted Hindu values. And what are Hindu values? Do good action, treat every human being as equal, good. There's no believer, non-believer divide. Um, uh, Obtain self-knowledge, do yoga to obtain who you are. And there is karma. If you do good actions, good things will happen to you. And then if you don't exhaust your karma, then your next life, it still continues. This is what Hinduism is.
Yeah.
Hinduism is beautiful. Sanatana Dharma is beautiful.
Okay. So, secret of the Vedas, every Veda Sutra has three types of meaning: literal, higher, deep, bhautik, daivik, and adhyatmic. Can you little bit tell a little bit of that? Because what is the three type of meaning? And usually we don't understand, like it's difficult to understand even one type. So can you?
Okay. Let me go back to Sanatana Dharma, what or Hinduism is.
Yeah.
Uh, it's called, Vedas are called Trayi Vidya, or triple knowledge. Trayi means triple, right? Vidya means knowledge. Why triple? Because, okay, if you close your eyes, you think about yourself. If you open your eyes, you look at the big cosmos outside of you. Okay. So to this reality, there are three aspects. One is the whole cosmos,
Mhm.
existence. which is called Sat. The other is the fact that you're thinking about it. That's consciousness. That's called Chit.
Mhm.
And the third is Ananda, which means the fact that you can discover yourself is something of beauty, right? Or happiness. So reality has three aspects: Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat, the whole cosmos which is connected, is Vishnu. Chit is Shiva, and Ananda is the goddess, is the Devi.
Okay.
And likewise, everything that you read in the Vedas has three meanings. One is the surface meaning, bhautik, and bhautik meaning which is related to the physicality. You can talk about, hey, Indra is like is has a form, right? But Indra is not. Indra is the chief of the gods. But gods, who are the gods? They are, you can imagine them, they are actual physical things, but they are really senses. Adi Daivik means that they are really senses. Indra is our chief sense. All the gods are within us, right? And Adhyatmic is that relationship between our body, which is the bhautik, to the Daivik, which are the senses, to the Atman, because the Atman is one. The Atman means the knowledge of the Atman.
Atman, yeah.
Atman is one.
Yeah.
So any deep knowledge will have three aspects. One will be the physical. So you can say Ganesha is this image. That is the physical. That is the bhautik, right? Then you can say that really Ganesha is the presiding deity of the Mooladhara chakra.
Mm.
And that is what opens up all the doorways of knowledge,
Mhm.
right? From through emotion. Then you can say that it's really a sagun, meaning representation in terms of attributes of something which is beyond words.
Mhm.
Because Atman is not it cannot be described in words. There is a very famous mantra in the Veda which says, or in one of the Upanishads, which says neti neti, na iti, not this, which means no words will suffice to describe what Atman is. It's beyond words.
Yeah.
Neti neti.
Mm.
So anything that you look at has three aspects. The physical, the the mental or sensory, and then beyond that, which connects it to the deeper understanding of reality, which is beyond words.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next one. Quantum mechanics is described in Vedas. From Agni, we go to Shiva. So, how the quantum mechanics is described in Vedas?
No, quantum mechanics is not described in the Vedas at
Okay.
all.
Okay.
But what happened was that the creator of quantum mechanics
Mhm.
was a Vedantin named Erwin Schrödinger. He was
Okay.
from Austria. And
Okay.
he claims that he was inspired by the Vedas because there's a Upanishadic Mahavakya meaning great sentence,
Mhm.
which says, I am Atma Brahma, that this Atman is the entire cosmos, right? Because Atman is one,
Yeah.
and your Atman and my Atman is the same.
Okay.
Of and Atman is this Brahman. The whole reality is Atman, mirrored in Atman, right? So this idea that this small thing is a superposition of all possibilities, not in a physical sense, because Atman is transcending idea, was the idea that Schrodinger took
Mhm.
and he wrote it mathematically. That created quantum mechanics.
Okay.
So quantum mechanics is not in the Vedas, but the ideas in the Vedas, because what's beautiful about the Vedas is that it talks not only about things.
Mhm.
Like in Newtonian mechanics, you only have properties of things. There is no place for the observer, for the
Yeah.
conscious being. But the Vedas speak about the conscious being. It's also the science of the Atma. It's also called Atma Vidya,
Mm.
right? So in quantum mechanics, the observer is given a place for the first time in the Western sciences. And that's where inspiration from the Vedas played a very important role.
Okay. All right. So, why Sanatan is universal? What do you mean by Vashvik knowledge? And what is Shankya?
Uh, Vashvik, Vishwa means which is universe. Vish means which is everywhere, which is where Vishnu comes from. Vishnu is the God, or transcending reality which pervades all of reality. So Vashvik means universal,
Okay.
right? So Sanatan is not, it's not a tribal knowledge. It's not about this is the divinity I worship. Sanatan knowledge is knowledge of the Atman. So it belongs to the whole universe. Anybody can relate to it. If anybody who wants to know about what Atma is, who they are, because we have, each one of us, every human being or animals also have a body which is physical, and the body goes through transformations. You grow up, or you fall sick, or you use medication, this or that. But behind the body is the Atman, right? The Atman never gets old. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Atma is always young. Each one of us, no matter how old we are, we believe we are young because our Atma is young, right? But if people want to know who they are, they must know what the science of consciousness is. And the Vedas are the science of consciousness. So it is universal knowledge. It's for all of humanity, and not for their own good, but for the good of all living creatures and the earth itself.
Okay. In Vedic time, people were in harmony with nature, but now people are not connected to nature. Like we are cutting forests, we eat animals. So, do you think we should come back in the harmony, and we once we understand the science behind it, we shouldn't be, we should become vegetarian and we should not cut forest. And what do you think about that?
See, the central idea of the Vedas, meaning one Atman and all of living beings, also makes you compassionate. The moment you realize that this animal also has an Atman, of course, their brain capacity is different, their emotional thing, but they also love. We know anybody who's had pets, pets love as much as human beings do. The moment you are really into your own self in a positive way, Atma Vidya way, you get compassion. And once you have compassion, you also treat other animals humanely. And once you do that, earth itself is living. You also treat trees and plants and every other aspects of physical reality in a compassionate way. Wouldn't that be good? That will be returning back to nature, which doesn't mean that you leave out technology. You can also use technology, but use it in a constructive and positive way to help every human being realize their potential, and not create a system of hegemony or of oppression, or of treating others in a negative way. So I think, yes, this would be a beautiful way to move ahead for all of society. And this is going to happen. You know why? Because with robotics and AI, machines will do most work, and populations will fall across the world. As populations fall, people will start asking, well, what's life all about? When you have to work from morning to night, carrying bricks or doing some other physical labor, you don't have time to necessarily think about these things, right? Because you're in physical discomfort. But when people don't have to do it, they will be asking all these questions. And the deepest questions there are about what Atman is, what consciousness is, what reality is, are in Sanatana Dharma. And that is the reality of Sat Chit Ananda, which is Vishnu, Shiva, and the Devi, and the goddess. And the goddess has three aspects. One is Ichha Shakti, which is Saraswati, Gyan Shakti, which is Lakshmi, and Karya Shakti, which is goddess Durga. So these are three aspects of the goddess. And what we need to do, what Indians need to do, and everybody else, because all human beings are the same, are equal. What they need to do is to get wedded to, first of all, worship Saraswati, Ichha, knowledge, and then get wedded to action. Let goddess Durga guide you to doing good, being good to everybody.
Okay. Okay, coming back again to science, Kannada and law of motion. He discovered law of motion 2000 years. We also discussed about Kannada, but he discovered law of motion 2000 years before Newton discovered law of motion. Every action is equal to opposite reaction in Vaisheshika Sutra. I know we have talked, but yeah, just give a little bit more
Yeah,
insight on the law of motion. Yeah.
Kanad.
Yeah.
Kanad was a rishi who wrote the Vaisheshika Sutras, and he's. Some people say his name Kanad. Kana means atom because
Okay.
his whole Vaisheshika Sutras are about atomic reality, that
Mhm.
everything is atomic, right? Well, there are five of the Mahabhutas, which is Prithvi or Earth, water, fire, and air. These are atomic, and Akasha is not atomic. So that's what he said. So he says that these atoms or these anus combine together and they form structure. So which is like what you have in chemistry. But he also talked about laws of motion, as we talked about, discussed last time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
right now as well.
Yeah.
And one of his sutras is Karya Virodhi Karma, which means to every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Isn't
Yeah.
that beautiful? That
Yeah.
is the third law of nature, third law of
Newtons.
motion from Newton's.
Yeah,
So we
we all
must,
study in the school. So, but then we have to give reference here. Like, we are going to start a, you know, a movement.
we should do
We'll
it.
take a placard and we'll stand in front of UN. Laws of Motion by Kannad.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now, I think, okay. What is, maybe this is the last we'll end. What is Sanskrit mantra chanting effect? Like how it affects the human brain? Like if we chant Sanskrit mantra and what we should chant? Like we have so many. Like I got some books and we were reading. First of all, I feel very unfortunate that I don't know Sanskrit. But see, even if we start learning and stay, because we know Hindi, so maybe even if it's, so what we should chant and what is the effect of chanting on human mind?
Okay, there have been some experiments done in the last 20 years, 20, 30 years, where measurements have been made. Um, People who chant, Sanskrit chants, and those who don't. So you do have baseline data on the brain size, etc. And then after chanting for 6 months, they measure the brain size and so on. They discover that those chanters, the areas related to reasoning, etc., actually became larger. And
Mm.
anybody can Google it, and you'll find, and there's even a Scientific American article on this, that indeed chanting helps. And in fact, what's beautiful is, right now Indians are CEOs of so many big companies in America,
Yeah.
and most of these CEOs are they come from families where they actually do chant. Do you know that many of them are from South India? And as you know, South Indian people in their homes on Sundays, they do Vishnu Sahasranamam chanting, 1008 names of Vishnu. So if you chant that, just chanting itself uh, makes that powerful vibration, first of all, and also helps you learn Sanskrit, because you know how the words are combined together, which is called sandhi or sandhi vichhed. And that gets you back to the root sounds and words, because what it does is, now it's possible that if you chant it in some other language also, it might help you, but Sanskrit is the most abstract structure that there is, most rich structure of a language. And chanting also brings you to the elements of that structure, which sort of connects you to the very elements of your consciousness. Because as I said, the Devis and the Devatas are within you, they are the senses. And in fact, there is a neuroscientific proof of that. If you get a particular kind of an injury, you can lose the capacity to read, and it's called alexia.
Mhm.
But you can still write. Isn't that counterintuitive? If you
Yeah,
can't read, how can you write? And
exactly.
this is called alexia without agraphia. Graphia means to write. Alexia without agraphia. You can Google it. And that is certainly true. So the gods and the goddesses are within us. So chanting is sort of invoking the power of these gods and goddesses. Now, of course, the most famous of the mantras is the Gayatri mantra, right? But there are many other mantras also. Or whatever you chant, you can chant stotras, which are Sanskrit songs or hymns praising one divinity or the other. But now notice that I'm not talking of, when I said that the gods are within you, that also makes it universal, Vashvik, for everybody. We are not saying that these are Indian gods. These are, the word Hindu itself is a name for India, right? These are universal forces. Any human being can get connected to these powers that are within them. And Sanskrit is a beautiful language which opens up these doors. It doesn't matter how old you are, which language background you come from, whether you're European or a Chinese, anybody can start learning Sanskrit at any time.
So, like, see, to be on a practical side, see, when the kids are born here and they don't know Hindi or Sanskrit, like, but the translation is in English and all. If we sit with our kids and if we say Vishnu Sahasranama, and if it is written in English, if we chant, you think that that'll benefit?
Of course,
To be practical, yes.
you will be chanting in Sanskrit, because Sanskrit can be written in any script. It can be written in English script, and it is written in English script also, or Devanagari, or Gujarati, or Tamil, or Bengali. So it can be written in any script. So even if you don't know the Devanagari script, which is the standard Sanskrit Hindi script, you can only read English script. And there's some diacritical marks. Once you know, like A with a line on it means A, and so on, then you can read Sanskrit in the English script, and you can. And now, of course, it's so easy. You have videos and videos, YouTube. You can see any chant, you can listen to it, and then you can copy it, and you can use that as a model. So it's not a problem anymore.
Okay. All right, sir. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you. And before I let you go, do you have any final comments for my viewers?
Well, for all of your viewers, The Atman is a great window. Keep watching, and also since we were talking about the Atman and we are talking about Dhi meaning our minds, so let this be a starting point. In case you haven't done Sanskrit and chanting before, open up this whole amazing cultural history that we have from India, great wisdom. And this is not only for the past, it's also for the future, because science now stands at the frontier of consciousness. And consciousness is what Vedas are all about. And so all that wisdom can be a great help to anybody, no matter what their career is, because Sanatana Dharma also says you should live life by 4 purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And so you do artha and kama, enjoy life to the fullest, make as much of money, be ambitious, but do it within the guardrails of dharma, which means morality and goodness, and moksha, which means be prepared to renounce, also give, not just keep on gathering. If you just keep on gathering, that's like a poison, which is what is happening in the Western society. If you are only accumulating without giving up, because giving up is also freedom, right? Moksha is the translation of the word moksha is freedom. You must also be free of your attachments. That's what Sanatana Dharma does. So between the two guardrails of dharma and moksha, between morality and non-attachment, live life to the fullest. This is the most beautiful message for all of mankind that there can be.
Okay. Thank you. Bye, sir. Good luck.
Thank you, Anamika.
Bye.